How the hell is Korea?
Hot.
Hot?
Yeah. Well, it's like they're about I'd say about 2-3 weeks ahead of us over here as far as heat. You know, it's in like the 80s every day, sometimes 90. But polluted. China's fine dust, ultra fine dust. It's all smoggy over there, but other than that, it was nice.
You said you saw through binoculars North Korea, right?
There's like a river that separates them, and you can look out, and there's like right at the border. I saw people over there like working in some fields and stuff like that, and some farmers. And you could see them through binoculars.
All right, so you were right at the border.
For one day, little like excursion I did one day. I went up there.
Yeah,
it's close. It's only about like less than an hour from Seoul. It's pretty close.
Yeah.
They're right there. So. And
here we've had so much rain that mosquitoes are the main problem.
Already? Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're getting them over here. It's not as much. It's not a lot, but we're starting to get them over here. I saw one in my room the other day.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I have an outdoor bed on which I put a screen tent. And on the tent, I see 20, 30 mosquitoes waiting to eat. This is probably the only place on the North American continent where I don't have mosquitoes on me. But I get to watch them and go, ha ha.
You think you could use like a cheesecloth or something?
I don't know. What does a cheesecloth do?
I think that's what it's called. They're like filters, the screen filters, but they're like, you put them on your door to block out mosquitoes and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, these guys, there are enough of them. They're out by the millions. So there's always a way for them to find a way into a room if it's not sealed. So this little tent gives me about a foot in all directions, except my back when I'm sleeping on it. So I get to watch mosquitoes trying to get me.
Maybe you could use a bigger tent. A bigger one. That's
a bigger one. What do you do in the winter time with it? You know.
I mean, you don't have to worry about mosquitoes.
No. This is about as good a size as you can get, because it gives you the ability to move your hands and feet and not be touching the ends, the sides or the ends.
Yeah.
Anyways, how's it going?
My mom just came back from Canada.
She was visiting her family?
Yeah, she went with her mom because her family came down. Her mom came down and she went.
Yeah.
We're back with her, stayed a week. I guess, she needed a break,
Yeah.
Came back, I think it was Saturday. And
everybody getting over the trauma?
Yeah, everyone's pretty much fine. My mom's fine. She's not like can't function or anything. She's not like that.
Yeah. Good. Well, you had enough lead up time, I guess, to prepare everybody for an eventual happening.
How did you deal with that trauma when you went to with Tom?
Well, it was different because it was always a feeling that they had done him in.
Mm-hmm.
So it was more an investigative period of time rather than a worrying about anything, you know.
Yeah.
Certainly, we came to the conclusion that Tom's illness was basically the end product of electromagnetism, but his death was more precipitated by drugs over a 3-month period given to him by his doctor's secretary, who would get free samples from pharmaceutical companies. And Tom would be taking all that stuff. And then, of course, going to the hospital and being fine enough to sign his lottery ticket at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and being dead at 4:30, 5 o'clock. So looking at what was happening in the room, it was all suggestive that he was not going to go home, that they were going to make sure that was his last stop. When a doctor comes to you and says, Mr. Kealey, what do you think about DNR? And I looked at them and I said, do not resuscitate? What are you talking about? Well, that gave me a hint about what they had in mind. And, of course, when the so-called coroner went to the hospital and supposedly claimed him to be mortally ill by reading notes from the nurses, which he did not understand himself, and had to read to Jennifer on the telephone what the notes said. And of course, Jennifer said, well, if he was getting fed intravenously, was there any bottle in between the food and the body? And they said, the coroner said, yeah, there was. And that's when Jennifer said they killed him. So she would know a lot more than I do about the medical practitioners and how they go about doing things. It was basically a preordained activity. Get him into the hospital and get rid of him, because he has divulged the fact that he's always been an agent for the police.
That's what I was going to ask you. Like, these doctors, and I guess it's all of them working together. So, like, so why is it some doctors are more successful than others? Is it like some doctors, they do what they're told and they kill whoever?
Surgeons have the legal right to kill. And coroners are the highest paid bureaucrats in the system of government.
Really? Did not know that.
So if they get the word do this person in, the surgeon is the person with the right to kill, and the coroner has the right to cover up.
So, are they linked?
Yeah.
I remember that code. Yeah, I'm sure they work together. The 007, right? License to Kill. Is that linked to the surgeon?
Well, it's linked to following instructions from the police and the politicians and the bureaucrats. So they don't follow instructions from junior politicians, but if the premier or the prime minister says do something, they do it. Or if the top bureaucrats, who are more likely to be the ones calling the shots, because bureaucrats don't get elected, they just collect pensions after 30 years of service.
Mm-hmm.
They give the word, and I guess the female doctor from India, came into the room and she asked me what I thought about DNR. That left me with no doubts that somebody was about to do something dastardly, because he was sitting on the bed and recovering from his collapse at Walmart. And there was no doubt in my mind that as long as they fed him, he would be back to normal. That the drugs and the electromagnetism is what shuts down your body. And they were feeding him prednisone. Prednisone is a drug that shuts down your repair mechanism. It's basically used in order to stop a certain disease from progressing further. They shut down the entire body's mechanism for fighting disease on the pretext that then they'll be able to get at this specific illness that this person supposedly has. But the minute you shut down the entire system, you can be killed by anything that would normally be prevented by a normal body.
You know what my dad, I remember he came back from a doctor that, I guess the doctor diagnosed him. As soon as he started taking some medication, I guess they recommended, he started stuttering a lot and could even talk, really. It like cut off his communication. But when I noticed, when his brain wasn't working, it was right after, around that time, I learned who you were, and I started communicating with you.
Yeah.
And it happened, and I don't know, I don't have so much direct, like, hard proof, but I have a feeling like it was some type of message or
well, you know what a certain German former Secretary of State for the U.S. used to call those people? Useless eaters. So a useless eater is a guy who collects a pension and is not a friend of the system. or he is a former friend of the system who knows too much. Now, your dad was a pharmacist, wasn't he?
Yeah.
So he would know a lot about drugs and what can do what to whomever they pleased, and he may have known of occasions where they did.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, they have those types of people. Like, you remember how Michael Jackson was killed? The guy, his name was Conrad something.
Yeah.
They have, I guess, these people they can call, and so I guess it's all types of professions and stuff like that. They can just give these people a call, and they just do it.
They handle it. Yeah.
Wow.
And it usually ends up with a specialty location where they're used to doing it more than in other places. And I would suggest to you that a lot of people who would normally have gone to the hospital in Ottawa but needed to be done in would end up being taken to Kempville. There's much less possibility that somebody would blow the whistle in Kempville. And you also have, a lot more doctors these days who come from countries where the culture is different about the value of human beings.
Yeah.
Like India being a prime place.
Yeah, you're right about that. My dad told me, like, a lot of the people he worked with were from other countries.
Yeah.
And being one of them.
Yeah. Well, they don't want to pay pension to a couple of billion people.
Yeah.
So they're given an opportunity to live out their life until they have no value to the culture. And then those people are done in. So when you take people trained in medicine in those countries and then come and apply their trade in North America, they look at government much differently than somebody born and raised in North America. And if they only get a little bit of a hint that somebody is no longer needed, they know what that means.
Yeah. I guess that's linked to the gene thing where you have with the migration, like you have a bunch of people come in from another part of the world and they offer some type of to the system because of their genes.
There's no doubt that parents pass on genetics, but there's also no doubt that many countries in the world operate a genetic engineering system. So if genes that are imposed upon a body in which they were not born, they have the capability of surviving the transfer and transmittal to their descendants over a 4-generation period. So that means great-grandparent to grandparent, grandparent to parent, and parent to offspring. And I mean, you don't have to be very smart to look at what's happening in sports these days. everybody's looking in baseball, for example, to grab onto the sons of great baseball players so that they continue the line. Toronto is very good for doing that kind of stuff. Any event, I have no doubt that I was genetically engineered, but something went wrong in their expectations. I became stubborn, but not for their purposes. And I know that my parents were stubborn and were, I call them my parents. The place I was raised, they had no real reason to get married except to front for genetically engineered children. Father was Irish, spoke only English. Mother was French, was totally bilingual, spoke to us in French, spoke to him, her husband, in English, and never had the feeling that they were speaking to each other as much as at each other. They were communicating about a task to be done rather than liking each other.
I'm sure there's plenty of families out here like that, but that's not something I would see on the surface. I'm sure.
No, it's basically seen when you're raised in that environment.
Yeah.
Glenn, what was that story or that happened to you with the vase? You were like in some hotel or motel or something, and you told that like years ago.
I'm trying to remember what that might be.
I think it gave hints to you about, like you're from a test tube or something like that.
Well, everything in my growing up made no sense to me at a later date when I look back on it. And much of it had to do with being told that I had a special role to play, and that the special role had its origin in Rigaud, Quebec. Rigaud, if you think of it as English rather than as the French word, it's go again, born again, make it happen like you did the last time type of thing. And when I was 5 or 6 years old, about 1948, 49 time frame, my mother brought me to Rigaud because they had a grotto, or cave, dedicated to what they called the Blessed Virgin, Mary, Mother of God. And I remember things like being on the train and asking my mother if I could have something off a tray that some servant on the train was selling, going bench to bench type of thing. maybe chocolate bars or chips or soft drinks or whatever. And I remember my mother saying that she didn't have the money. And she was sorry, but she couldn't afford to buy me anything. And then we got to Rigaud and got off the train, and that's kind of halfway between Ottawa and Montreal. And I was walking with my mother, and there was thousands of people there attending some kind of religious ceremony, when I was taken by the hand and brought inside the building apart from my mother. And I was basically told inside the building something, as I had been told before by my mother, that I had a special role to play. And I remember being told that that role was linked to a female breast. And I didn't even know at the time what a breast was. They had to kind of explain it to me. And it was a guy in a red tunic or gown or something like that who was telling me that. And to remember that is basically the message they were trying to get out. And eventually they took me out and took me over to my mother, handed me over to her. She had been at some ceremony and wasn't surprised that I had not been with her. And then on the way back home, she asked me on the train if I wanted something, chips or chocolate bars or whatever. And I said, but you don't have any money. And she said, I have money now. And whatever I wanted, she gave me. So I had no doubts in my mind that she had got money from somebody at that thing in Rigaud that she didn't have on the way up. And that kind of activity through the 16 years that I lived at home was normal. First there was nothing, then there was something, and at 16, of course, I went off to Toronto to go to college from Ottawa. And one day there was no money to pay for anything. The next day I'd receive money more than I expected. And that continued until my mother basically was on the verge of dying or something many years later, and I was sent $50,000 from somebody, a woman called my mother, who basically I couldn't figure out where she would get $50,000, but that it wasn't just me, it was me and my sisters each got some amount of money. The way it was presented to me, however, was not, this is for you. My sisters were trying to get the money, I guess, and they said, this is from Mom. She wants you to invest it for her until she gets out of whatever hospital or... So all my life, I felt that somebody was paying to have me do certain things. and that it was funneled through my mother, but it was not hers. Now, that, I don't know if that answers your question, but I remember something about a vase, but I don't remember the details of what I used to know. When you get to be 78 years old, these things disappear.
I think maybe you were saying you're on the road or something, and you're staying at some hotel or something, or maybe it was before you kind of knew what was going on. But then there was like a vase, and it might have been in your hotel room or in a window or something. Some clue for you, but anyway, I can't remember all of it. But
I. When did I tell you that? About 10 years ago?
Probably. Probably close to that.
How long have we known you? How long have we known each other?
Years.
Do you remember when I first called you, Glenn?
No.
I can't. I think.
I think we started, I want to say, end of 08, maybe January of 09. So, yeah, probably 10.
Yeah.
10 and a half, almost 10 and a half years, almost.
Yeah.
Wow. It's crazy how time just flies like that. I can't believe I've known you for that long.
Well, the problem that I have is that I went on the road for 10 years and spoke to hundreds of thousands of people. So a lot of times I'd get phone calls from people saying, I met you in Edmonton or Vancouver or whatever. Yeah, maybe. You forget the details.
Yeah. You forget them, but when somebody, sometimes it's usually something, music or emotion that will like jolt it, like it'll come back. But it has to be something significant, like an impact. For me, it's like an impact on my life somehow.
I always had a good memory until I was about 70 years old. Started losing words that are simple, that I used every day, and all of a sudden I'd stop in the middle of a sentence and I couldn't remember the word that went in there. And part of it was because I was raised in the two languages. At one stage of the game, wonder whether the word you're looking for is in French or in English.
Well, my dad, like when the signs of that disease, he stopped speaking English. It's like he completely forgot, and he reverted back to the first language.
Yeah.
And I hear that's common for people who get that. But yeah, you were talking about bureaucrats earlier, and I was watching something about Vikings, and how they would, a lot of what they did was raid other towns.
Yeah.
Rape and pillage. I mean, that's a lot of human history, and I think these types became bureaucrats because as I've been watching like all the stuff about bureaucrats coming out, that's what they do. They raid people's wealth, but they do it in the modern way for today. They, with tax-paying money and everything, they just steal so much money.
Yeah.
And
well, they belong to associations that let them conspire for the purpose of getting around the rules that apply to them. if it says, for example, that you're not allowed as a civil servant, bureaucrat, you're not allowed to look up the internet and make judgments on whether you hire people by what is written on the internet, because it may not, in fact, be true. So you're not allowed to do it. Well, what they do is they call their American counterpart, and the American calls their Canadian counterpart, and from the information that they are given on the person they want to recruit that is acquired outside the country, they make their decision. And if somebody says, did you check the internet to get this information? They say, no, of course not. That would be illegal. But in fact, what they called is their association in a different country and have them check the internet and call them back. So,
what I'm seeing now, I don't know if you're watching, I've been watching what's going on again with the politics in the U.S. Now they're saying that they're holding the people who broke the rules for so long that they're going to hold these people accountable. And I'm seeing, it seems from where I'm standing, it seems like the walls are just closing in on them, and you're seeing their reactions, the things that they say that they're nervous because they're going to
well, right now, if I was a bureaucrat, I'd be nervous. Because their bosses are the ones who want to get rid of them. They have served their purpose of putting human beings in their environment when controlling the earth was most important to their bosses. But their bosses now have a different agenda. Their bosses want to control outer space. And therefore, the jobs, the tasks assigned to bureaucrats in the past 40 years are irrelevant to the task of opening up outer space for mining and manufacturing and travel and living under totally different circumstances. And therefore, these millions of bureaucrats that exist have jobs that are irrelevant to the task at hand, especially starting in 2020. So all of those bureaucrats will be put on the market for some surgeon to deal with. They don't want to be paid pension plans for doing nothing of value in the future. So what you're looking at, you're going to see a lot of change about who's guilty of doing what, because what they were applauded for doing in the past, they are going to be exposed of doing in the future.
Yeah.
And instead of a reward, it'll be a trip to Kempville General Hospital.
Yeah. Yeah. But they're being, for this, whatever, I guess, controlling space, and it seems like they're being replaced, right? Because, I mean...
Smaller groups, different tasks, and therefore genetically engineered differently. And how you take over a country in order to begin a totally new approach to things is you create a war in a country and you move the properly re-engineered children with their parents into refugee camps, and then you transfer them as a group to the countries you want to change, and they come in as children, and 15, 20 years later, they are doing the job that was planned for them 20 years before. The parents die off, the children have a new task, and that's why Syria is the center of activity for genetic engineering, and most of the immigrants into Canada have been Syrians over the last 4 or 5 years.
It's not just Canada they're immigrating to. Are they immigrating to those Nordic countries up there?
Yeah, every country has to have new border guards, different approach to things.
That's what we're seeing now.
New policemen.
And
everything that's about control has to be changed.
Yeah, but what's sad is that I'm seeing it's being presented as, the people are going to be free or whatever. And
just think how many kids are standing at the U.S.-Mexico border.
Yeah.
And everybody says, but they're only children, without understanding that they are children who've been programmed in a South American country for a different task than their parents have. And once their parents get them into the country and accepted as citizens there, they are then in line for the new jobs. And the parents are sent back in many cases.
Mm-hmm.
And the children stay behind with a different approach to life.
Yeah. I remember when I was in Canada, when Stephen Harper was in office, you pointed out that his job was to be as far to the right and nasty as possible, so there would be a push to the left. And you referenced that happened in Europe, that people were so tired of Nazis that they went completely left. But it seems like now, I think I understand now why so many, a lot of, especially with the media, seeing a lot of them seem to be had this huge slant to the left. But now around the world, people, as far as elections and government, the government seems to be, they call it right-wing populism. They're more to they're like in power now. They call them nationalists or whatever. It's moving to the right. It's like a ping pong.
There's no doubt about it that Trump didn't get elected by the people who were in charge 10 years ago. Democrats were running the world, and now here we are 4 years later, and most countries are moving to the right. And 40, 50 years ago, they were on the right. Nazis.
Yeah.
Don't forget the word Nazi. If you change how you spell the sound, N-A-T-S-I, Nazi, is the same word as saint.
Yeah.
S-A-I-N-T, same letters as Nazi. Just keep shifting back and forth, and the people who were in charge have no power, and the people who weren't in charge are gaining power, and you need much less in size of a population. So we've all been told there are too many children in the world for the food that's available, and everybody's cut back from having 5, 10 children to having 1, maybe 2. So the new population is much smaller, and it forces the countries to bring in workers who bring their children who've been programmed differently. All of this is planned.
Exactly.
And has been for thousands of years.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, it is time to feed the cats. They have come to rescue themselves.
They're in power right now.
They're in power. That's why if you look at the word meow, it is the first 4 letters of me owner.
Oh, so me owner.
Yeah. They own the house here.
Yeah. All right. I guess you got to go serve the owner.
Yeah. But don't be shy. You can call again tomorrow or the next day or the day after.
Okay.
And I'll always find room for you.
Thank you.
You and Danny. Yeah.
Much appreciated.
Yeah. Because you are my voice that I don't have time to give to other people.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you for calling. Talk to you next time.
Okay.
All right.
Bye for now. Bye, Danny, too.
Bye.